Hello, my name is Thalia Johnson, and this is my tech demo for an enemy AI in Unreal Engine. So currently I have coded into Unreal a jump node, which allows the enemy to jump over ledges. It remembers the last location that it sees the player. It remembers the last time it was shot by the player. It can sense enemies it can sense the player within a direct detection radius. And also, when it loses sight or the enemy gets shot, it will also search for the player in the closest position to where they last saw or were shot at. So here we can see this is the map. Currently, there's just a box here that just for the enemy to jump on, and as you can see, when it comes through, it will jump on it and it will go away. So if we go out into the editing view, we can see here that next to the platform there are two trigger boxes, and here in the outlier we can see that they are, they're trigger boxes, and currently they have attached to them, the jump node component, actor component. So the jump node component currently doesn't have that much code. It just sets the actor label for the owner, so the trigger box, to be called jump node. And it also has a property which can be edited in Unreal, which is the connected navigation node, which is essentially the node that the actor should be walking towards if they want to jump. So back in Unreal, this jump box will be connected to this node, so that then it means that the enemy will only jump if they are going towards this direction to this node. So if they're going back that way, they will not jump if they accidentally clip into it. If you go back to the enemy code, we can see here that it gets the capture component which is its collider, and then sets a dynamic delegate onto it for when it overlaps with something, which it calls the begin overlap function. Once we go back down here, we can see that it checks if the label of the actor is called jump node. If it is, it checks its connected node to see if the enemy is going towards that node. And if it is, it will call the jump function, which it can do because it inherits from the character class. As well, I've also made it so I've changed the jump velocity to be a bit higher, so that it looks a bit smoother. So currently we're in the game right now. So as you can see, the enemy doesn't actually shoot at me right now. Currently it's in a state called neutral, which means it will only shoot at me if I shoot at it first. But as you probably just saw, it gets the last location that it sees of the player and creates a sphere just at that area. Currently it's just as a visual marker from now, just so as I know, but it could also be used later on in other games as a way to show that show the player that that's the last location that they will see it at. This is also something that happens when you shoot at the enemy. So if we shoot at the enemy and it doesn't see us, we can see that it creates a purple sphere and it disappears as soon as it sees us. So as you've probably seen, it will also search out the player depending on where it last sees it or where it last senses the player from it being shot. So if we can do this, it'll try and turn around and it'll go and look at me, like this. Then, it will continue to chase me as it tries to find different notes. But sometimes, if we go over here, you can see it turns around. So if I go back, show you again. You can see that it looks this way. So it looked forward, right, and then back. That's what happens when it arrives at the search node. So it just kind of turns around, looking at all the areas to see if it can get vision of the player again. And then if it does, it will engage the player, or if it doesn't, it will go back to its patrol state. So back to the code, we have the perception component, which is how the enemy sees. This was done in the labs in previous weeks. This is just adding a dynamic delegate for the perception component. So when it sees the player, it calls the sense player function. once we go down to here, if the stimulus was successfully sensed, so if it sees the player, it will say it sees the player, and it will also destroy any markers that have already been created, so it resets the markers. But if it loses sight of the player, so the else, it will set the last location of the player to its current location, and will also create a marker at its location. So, back at the states, we got the new state neutral, which is similar to patrol, except it will only change out of the state if the enemy takes damage, essentially. So it just checks if it's not at full health, and then it'll change to engage, patrol, or evade. I've also got it changed so in the engage, it will change to the search state if it can no longer see the player. So, and once that happens, it gets the last location seen of the player and tries to find the nearest node to that location. And once it goes to the search state, it calls the search function. And once we go down to agent search, it generates a path to the search node, and then it also checks if the enemy is at that search node, and if it is, then it says that it's at that node. If we go back again to the search state, we can see if it can't see the player or it's at the node, it will change into the agent look state, which is a state where it does a little animation, as we've seen before, where it looks around itself. And if we go down to the look animation, it has a timer on it, so after every 0.25 seconds, it changes the direction that it's looking at. And each time this function is called, it increases the animation counter so it looks into a different direction each time. And once it's finished looking in all directions, it says it's finished looking. And once we go back to the look state, if it's finished looking, it goes back into the patrol state. Now, we've also got the sense search. So that's essentially the same. It works the same as what I just explained with normal searching for sites, except it goes into the states up here. So if it checks if the enemy has lost health since the last time it's checked, so the last tick, and if it has, then it calls the sense finder function. This was at the bottom here. It detects the player by searching for all actors of the class of the player and setting the detected actor as that player. Then, since it sets the first actor that it finds as that player, since there's only going to be one player in the world at a time. Then, since it sets the last sense location as its the player's last location, and then changes the search node to that last sense location. Then it just checks if it can see the actor already. It can see the player. It changes into either engage or evade, depending on its health. But if it can't, it goes into the sense search state. And if there's any sense markers that have already been created, it destroys it and then creates a new marker at that location. And then sense search is pretty much exactly the same as the normal search function, except it is, except for it just has a different log. And it's there just in case I want to change something in the future, so it does a different type of look depending on different sensors other than last location, site location. So back in Unreal, we can see that the player character has a trigger sphere that's attached to it, which has the component player detection. It acts similar to the jump node component, except it just sets the tag as a trigger component. So if that means then when we go into the enemy, it will check for detection trigger. And then if it does, it calls the sense finder because it means it's sensed the player because that's its detection radius. So that was my tech demo for assignment 2. Thank you for watching.